Hello, everyone. My name is Arnav Biswas, and I'm a program manager in the Microsoft Endpoint Manager team based out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. My focus is Mac management strategy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany Silverstein, and I'm a program manager on the Microsoft Endpoint Manager team. I'm based in New York City, and I primarily focus on iOS and iPadOS device management.
In this talk, we will cover the key messages about Apple management in Microsoft Endpoint Manager that you should remember, followed by sharing all the exciting new innovations that we have been working on for iOS, iPadOS, and macOS. So now, Tiffany will get us started by talking first about iOS and iPadOS management.
So I'll get us started with the Cliff Notes version. If there are really only 4 things you get from this talk, they should be these. First, we're going to share some examples of how we've been scaling and adapting with our customers to provide stability in these times of crisis. I'll be showing a few of the options we can provide to help onboard your single and multi-user iOS and iPadOS devices. Then Arnav is going to share how we are taking our macOS management capabilities further than ever before. And of course, we'll touch on the myriad of new features that we've been preparing in the past few months, including new features for the iOS 14 and macOS 11 releases. So let's start with iOS and iPadOS management. If you watched our 2019 Ignite session, you'll know that we've been working very hard on scale improvements for a while. At the time, it didn't necessarily sound like the most exciting work on our roadmap. But as the world rapidly shifted to new modes of work and learning in the wake of COVID-19, our investment paid off, and we had the chance to provide so many great organizations, large and small, with stability as the multitude of demands on IT were rapidly shifting. For your corporate devices, you can count on Intune to enable 1,000 profiles per enrollment token, 2,000 enrollment tokens per tenant, and 3,000 Apple Business Manager location tokens. I know this is already coming in handy for organizations across the world with distributed IT workforces and cost centers. Sometimes, we hear questions like, how easy is it to deploy Intune? Can I onboard quickly? So I'd love to tell a little story today about just how rapidly you can deploy. Millions of devices across the world use our service every day. So when a pandemic hit and we heard that a large school system needed to get student devices managed and fast, we were confident we could help. We worked with one school district to roll out devices to their 1,800 schools in only 37 days. If we were in person right now, I think this is where I'd hear an applause. This meant 300,000 iPads provisioned with 9 million app licenses that students could use to get back to learning at a time it was really needed most. In just one single day, we actually deployed over 17,000 devices. So you might be wondering, how can I do this for my organization? There are a whole variety of great ways to provision your organization-owned devices with Intune and Apple Business or School Manager. If you have concerns about end users' network connections for downloading apps, or you just want them to hit the ground running with apps and policies deployed when they turn the device on, you can leverage our device staging process. In this process, you pre-provision the device with Automated Device Enrolment without a user affinity. When the user logs into the company portal for the first time on the device, they establish a user affinity with the device, which is maintained even after they log out of the app. There are just a few really quick steps to configure, so I'd really highly recommend you try this one out at home. First, you'll create an enrollment profile without user affinity. You'll assign the device licensed iOS company portal as a required VPP app to a device group. You'll configure company portal's device enrollment prompts to be hidden. And then you'll add the signed device ID as an MDM app config for the iOS company portal. Now, let's take a look at what you'll actually see on the device with these configurations.
The experience begins in Apple's Setup Assistant screens, just like the typical consumer experience when you buy a new iPhone or iPad from the store. The user will select their language, region, whether they'd like to use Apple's Quick Start functionality, and connect to a network. Using the token you've set up between Apple Business or School Manager and Intune, the device will receive your enrollment profile set up without user affinity. In that enrollment profile, you can detail which additional Setup Assistant screens you'd like to surface to the user. In this case, since we're setting the device up on behalf of the user, we'll skip all of them. Now we land at the home screen, and as you can see, our apps assigned to the device start immediately installing. If you want a truly white glove experience for your end users, whether they're second graders or the C-suite, you can ship these devices to wherever your users are located at this stage, and they'll only have one more step to get full access. When your user first picks up their new device, the company portal app that you've assigned has already been downloaded. When the end user opens the app, they'll be immediately prompted to log in and will perform some quick compliance checks. After this, they're ready to get productive. Our last interaction with the user for now will be a prompt to allow notifications from the company portal. This will enable you as their admin to send custom push notifications to your users whenever you desire. After the user logs into the company portal and gets compliant, their user-assigned apps and policies will begin to flow onto the device, enabling you to easily provision a simple set of apps to all organization-owned devices with tailored additions and particular policies for specific user groups. You can read about all of these capabilities as well as everything else we're presenting today at our Endpoint Manager documentation at docs.microsoft.com.
One of the really critical challenges we faced in this pandemic is how do we mobilize doctors and nurses faster and enable them to access their healthcare apps and incredibly sensitive patient data securely? With Shared iPad for Business, you can rapidly provision a shared device with all of the base policies required, while ensuring each user has a tailored, customized experience on the device. Users' data is placed in distinct user partitions, where each user has their own complex password. This is a feature that was previously available only to our education customers through Apple School Manager. But in talking to a lot of you, these conversations seem to really resonate in the enterprise as well, where these shared devices are common in scenarios like retail. We shared this feedback with Apple, and they introduced this feature into Apple Business Manager with AID federated authentication earlier this year. One example of a scenario this has been particularly relevant for recently comes from the healthcare space. An admin at a healthcare provider can provision a shared iPad with federated authentication to be used at a nurse's station. Now, let's see what that experience looks like for those nurses using the device.
Lee is a nurse who is signing into the shared iPad at the nurse's station for the first time. As you can see, as soon as he unlocks the device, he is prompted to enter his username. Once he enters his organizational username, he's led through the AID authentication experience that he's used to when accessing Microsoft 365 services. After he successfully authenticates, he's presented with a few setup assistant screens to determine his language and region, as he would experience if he were setting up a personal iPad for the first time. Now that Lee is an authenticated user, he'll be prompted to set a complex personal passcode that he will use in the future when he signs into the shared iPad. With just these few simple steps, Lee is ready to go on his rounds. He has access to all of the sensitive apps and data that his admin has provisioned. At the end of his shift, Lee simply locks the iPad and clicks a button at the bottom right of the screen to sign out and leaves it at the nurse's station for the next user. At the beginning of the next shift, Ava picks up the same shared iPad. She has already signed into this iPad before, so she sees her name remembered on the home screen. As soon as Ava selects her name, the device switches to Ava's preferred settings. She likes to use dark mode on her night shift. She enters her personal passcode and can pick up right where she left off previously, which happened to be on this Excel spreadsheet. She can work with all of her data and access everything that she needs to be productive. Once she leaves the Excel spreadsheet, Ava also sees two additional apps, Outlook and Teams, that are not available to anyone else on this device. This has been one great example of how Shared iPad for Business can be such a versatile utility for any enterprise that needs to provision shared devices at scale. This is a sneak peek at Endpoint Manager's support for Shared iPads for Business, but the team is so excited to leverage this iPadOS capability and build even more compelling M365 scenarios for your businesses, such as conditional access for shared users.
Now, I've only had the time to show you two demos of the exciting work we've been doing on iOS and iPadOS over the past few months, but there are so many other features that I'd really love to share. Things like augmented scheduling capabilities for OS updates, a whole variety of investments in shared devices, including macOS content caching, which will help speed up those iOS and iPadOS deployments, and a ton of resource access investments as well. We also continue to constantly iterate on the end user experience within our company portal app, as well as with the communication you have with your end users. Doing things like updating our customization so that you can target to user groups, as well as providing you with the ability to do push notifications for users' non-compliance and changes of device ownership are just a few of the things we've been doing in the area. And of course, we always have day zero support for new Apple releases. All existing features will be supported on day zero, as well as a few new features. And as a reminder, as we add support for iOS and iPadOS 14, we will be ending support for iOS 11. Your already enrolled devices will continue to receive policy, but new devices will not be able to use the company portal or enroll into Intune. Now, back over to Arnav for macOS management.
Thanks, Tiffany. Last year, we announced that Mac management in Microsoft Endpoint Manager is enterprise ready, and it is recognized as an industry leader in unified endpoint management. We achieved this through our deep support for native Mac MDM capabilities, as well as extended management features using the custom Intune agent that was announced last year. And this year, we're excited to share with you the new innovations in device management announced at Apple WWDC and our plans to support these in Microsoft Endpoint Manager. In addition, we will share how we have continued to listen to customer feedback and made major advances in device configuration, app management, and user experience on Mac. And lastly, we will share how we are doing even more on Mac with our custom Intune agent. Earlier this year, we introduced the ability to remotely run shell scripts on managed Macs once or in a specified schedule in device or user context. We also enabled remote log collection in Microsoft Endpoint Manager admin console to help troubleshoot any issues on managed Macs that you come across. These are capabilities supported using the custom Intune agent that is installed when shell script policies are assigned. We care about protecting user privacy. Therefore, the Intune agent is only present when script policies apply to a Mac. If shell scripts no longer apply, the MDM agent removes itself after 24 hours. You can also see new MDM payloads when configuring device configuration profiles for macOS, such as system extensions, content caching, privacy preferences, and wired networks payloads. We are also introducing an easier way to configure Microsoft Azure AD single sign-on app extension on macOS so that you can deploy it quicker than before. Another area of enhancement is file vault encryption management. If the device was encrypted by the user prior to the file vault MDM policy being enabled, Intune can now assume control of that. This means that a user can access their recovery key from the company portal app just as if the device were encrypted by file vault policy to begin with. We have also made great strides in our app management story. We now provide recommended app preparation guidance to customers who want to deploy DMG and APP app types to their Mac environments. Additionally, if you're using Microsoft Endpoint Manager to deploy Microsoft 365 apps for macOS, Microsoft Teams is now included. This means for both existing and new deployments of Microsoft 365 apps, Teams will be automatically installed if these apps are assigned as required, or if the user attempts to install the apps again when assigned as available. We've also made deploying Microsoft Edge and Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection easier than ever before in Endpoint Manager. You can simply choose the app from the macOS apps list and deploy. For Microsoft Edge, you can even choose from dev, beta, and stable channels. We have also added 8 new settings in Endpoint Manager's Endpoint Security Blade for the ATP app. This makes configuring settings for ATP much easier than before. We're proud of the attention we pay to end user experience in Microsoft Endpoint Manager, and that extends to Mac management as well. We listened to our customers that keychain prompts on macOS was a big pain point for their end users. So this year, we significantly improved how Microsoft signed apps get access to the device keychain for authentication on Macs. As Microsoft apps adopt our updated library, you will see this experience improve across apps. We're also excited to share that if you're using conditional access with Jamf managed devices, these keychain prompts have been reduced to just 1. We continue to modernize and improve the company portal for Macs. This year, we've improved the company access setup experience to match closely with the iOS experience that our users already love. And the signed-in user is now cached in the company portal for Mac to reduce the need to sign in. We are confident that all of these enhancements in device configuration, app management, and user experience are sure to delight our users. Apple made some great announcements for Mac management at WWDC this year. and we're excited to talk about what you can expect to see in Mac management in Microsoft Endpoint Manager when macOS 11 becomes generally available later this year. The biggest announcement Apple made was the introduction of 64-bit ARM chipset called Apple Silicon, and how easy it is for developers to transition to the new architecture. We want to ensure that our users have the best experience when they are managed by Endpoint Manager on the new Apple Silicon Macs, similar to how Apple showcased at WWDC our native Word, Excel, and PowerPoint apps running on these new machines. Therefore, to provide the best experience to users, we're building the company portal app for Mac natively for Apple Silicon. Starting in macOS 11, all user-approved enrollments are automatically considered supervised. So you can exercise the same level of control from Microsoft Endpoint Manager over all user-approved enrollments on macOS 11, as a device enrolled through Automated Device Enrolment or made supervised using Apple Configurator. We're also going to add the ability to skip a new setup assistant screen for accessibility during Automated Device Enrolment over Ethernet, enabling you to provision devices even faster at scale. We're introducing support for new device configuration capabilities and updating existing ones as applicable on macOS 11. Direct download setting updates the existing associated domains payload to allow IT to specify whether data for the associated domain is to be downloaded directly instead of through a content delivery network. You will be able to configure this new setting on a per app basis. We know that IT always strives to have control over the timing and delivery of software updates. We already had the ability to defer OS updates, but now we have added the new restriction that allows the ability to defer non-OS software updates on supervised Macs. Next, let's talk about app management. Lack of managed app features has been a big pain point for our Mac customers. We have been sharing that feedback with Apple, and it is great to see that with macOS 11, managed apps are finally being introduced on Macs. This brings app management capabilities to parity with iOS and iPadOS, which means that in addition to installing apps using MDM, IT can now convert already installed apps to managed apps. Managed apps can be uninstalled on Macs using Endpoint Manager's uninstall assignment type for the first time. Managed apps can also be pinned to the MDM profile, ensuring that they are removed when the device is no longer managed. On day 0 of macOS 11, you will be able to push volume purchased apps and custom apps as managed and remove them using Endpoint Manager. Non-store apps, such as line of business apps, will follow shortly to be installed as managed apps as well. Microsoft Endpoint Manager will also support app configurations for managed devices as an alternative toplists to push managed preferences to managed apps. This will make IT processes around app management uniform across iOS, iPadOS, and macOS. Now let me show you what managed apps will look like on macOS 11. In Microsoft Endpoint Manager Admin Console, if you choose any volume purchased app for macOS, such as Microsoft Word here, you will now see Uninstall as a new assignment type. The assignment experience is what you're already familiar with in the Admin Console. So let's show you what happens to managed apps when a device is deprovisioned on macOS 11. On this device, these VVP apps are already installed as managed apps. Now let's switch over to the device. As you can see, I am now on the managed Apple Silicon Mac, and the managed apps we saw earlier on the Admin Console are installed here, namely Microsoft To Do, Remote Desktop, OneDrive, Outlook, and Word. Now watch what happens when I remove the device from management. Within seconds, the managed apps are uninstalled from the device. That means that there is no custom scripts or overhead necessary for IT when deprovisioning Macs or cleaning up installed apps. Next, I would like to highlight some considerations for managing Mac apps outside the Mac App Store. While it is possible to turn a non-store app to a managed app, Apple has outlined specific requirements that must be satisfied for this. The app distributable must be a single app in PKG format that contains no nested packages, and it must be installed in the applications directory. Here are some best practices to keep in mind as you consider getting your line of business applications ready for macOS 11. Apple promises that the translation technology called Rosetta 2 on macOS 11 can run existing Mac apps built for Intel chipset. While we have found non-native apps to function using Rosetta on Apple Silicon, we recommend that you test your existing apps on Apple Silicon in a non-production environment to determine compatibility. If you're going to be in a mixed environment with not all Macs running macOS 11, which is likely the case for most enterprises, you might be considering rebuilding your apps for Apple Silicon. With Xcode 12, you can build your apps as universal to produce a single app that can run on both Intel and Apple Silicon Macs. Lastly, apps must provide a bundle ID in the plist provided that matches the app name. This is essential to install apps successfully on macOS, irrespective of whether the app is managed or not. In addition, apps can only include pre- and post-install scripts. Next, I want to talk about how we're innovating using the Intune MDM agent on Mac that we announced last year. It is really exciting to see our customers running shell scripts at scale using the MDM agent, and we're delighted to announce that soon you'll be able to do even more. We talked to enterprise customers who are using Macs in their environment and learned that often it is essential for IT to collect custom signals from managed devices that just cannot be collected using standard MDM controls. These signals allow customers to make informed business decisions regarding asset planning, device configuration, and often allows for help desk cost savings. Soon, you'll be able to define a custom attribute policy in Microsoft Endpoint Manager, where you can define a policy name, choose a data type of the result to be collected, and provide a shell script that can be run to collect the custom attribute. We envision that this will provide greater flexibility to Mac admins and enable them to collect device or user properties of their choosing to support their goals. The shell script provided must echo the result to be collected to standard output so that it can be reported back to the Microsoft Endpoint Manager admin console. Custom attribute scripts will be run every 8 hours, and admin will be able to see an aggregate view of all custom attributes per device in the future. We envision that you will be able to use these custom attributes for Mac in more powerful ways in the future in Endpoint Manager. We have learned from our Mac admins how much they love to engage and give back to the online Mac community. So we have created a GitHub repository containing sample shell scripts and custom configuration profiles that will be useful to you in your Mac management journey with Microsoft Endpoint Manager. We want this repository to be a place of collaboration and learning for the Endpoint Manager Mac community. So check it out at github.com/microsoft/shell-intune-samples and try out your favorite script in a non-production environment before you deploy. I hope we have shown you today these key takeaways and you're excited to try all of this out at home. Today, you heard just a few examples from the education and healthcare worlds of how we have scaled and adapted with all of you to provide the management and security you need in this time of great flux. We demonstrate just 2 of our options for onboarding organization-owned devices, whether for one user or many, and hope you take the time to explore our product and determine which onboarding methods fit your needs. We are excited to announce and continue to announce in each monthly release all of the innovative functionality we are adding to support you in your iOS, iPadOS, and macOS management journey. Wherever you are in your cloud management, whether you're still thinking about your move to Intune or you have started with co-management, or you're completely on the cloud, use Microsoft Endpoint Manager. It truly is your hub to unify security, apps, access, compliance, and end-user experience across your entire technology estate. And because it can leverage Microsoft's powerful data set, it is also intelligent, delivering analytics and signals to keep you ahead of change so you can keep costs down and keep your organization running smoothly, whatever the future brings. And we believe partners are key to success, and Endpoint Manager is also the integration point for the ecosystem. And if you missed Brad Anderson's live session or any of the others here, make sure you catch them as well. Thank you.